everybody, welcome to Emily Kate Made This. I am Emily Kate and I'm coming to you from Berlin in Germany. Welcome to episode 39 of my knitting podcast. This is a channel for knitting and sewing and general crafty mayhem, and today is all about knitting. This is my episode of redemption. I have finished not one but two projects that you have heard about non-stop for months on end. And I feel I have redeemed myself. They are failed projects that have now turned into successful projects, and I shall show you them. I actually recorded this video on Saturday and then I recorded another half yesterday, and I am now re-recording it. I know it sounds really stupid, but the way that the light was coming in made me look so wrinkly and old. And then I'm growing out my fringe and all I see is this forehead. I'm also oiling my hair with some hair oil, so it looks greasy now. So either way, it's just not working. Let's get on to the knitting. So, first finished object. If you have been here a while, you will remember that I made my jumper. I made my husband a jumper in December time for his Christmas present. But alas, said jumper did not come to life and I unraveled it. But I had made a really cute little mushroom colourwork section on the bottom, so I kept that and turned it into a skirt for myself. So now I have a lovely skirt, but he was still jumperless. So in January I ordered some new yarn and chose a different pattern and commenced the journey of making him a new jumper. And I don't quite know what happened. I don't know if it was the lack of enthusiasm because it had gone wrong and I had spent so long on his other one, but I seemed to just struggle with the jumper and it was cast aside, I think probably by February, and then I thought I'd give it to him for his birthday in April. That didn't happen, and it just got abandoned basically. And then we booked our tickets to go to Sweden, to go to Gotland in September, and I thought he needs a nice woolly jumper to wear in Scotland, and he just so happens to have a jumper already cast on in Swedish wool by a Swedish designer. It is meant to be. So I picked up the abandoned project and started on it again, and I really don't know why I gave up. I could probably watch back one of my episodes, maybe I talked about it. I know I was having a lot of hand pain in January, and so that might have had something to do with it. And I don't know, the yarn's quite sticky and I'm using wooden needles. Maybe that was it. The cable was driving me mad. I'm still not 100% sure if I did the cable correctly. When I read the pattern, I read it and I think that's what I did. But then there's a little chart and I don't know if I'm doing it right. Or if I did it right. But hey ho, it looks nice regardless, so even if it's wrong, it looks nice and no one knows. But I do want to make my own one for myself, so I should probably find out. Maybe I can ask Anna, does this look like your pattern? Did I do it correctly? And yeah, so let me show it to you and then I'll keep blabbing about it. There it is in all its gloriousness. So let me discuss. I actually recorded this video yesterday and talked about it and have said since deleted that video because I hated it. But let me see if I can remember everything I said. I realised when I was talking yesterday that I did do a swatch and I did not block it. I swatched, I checked my gauge, and I checked my gauge as I was knitting, and it said 20 stitches. So I thought, okay, I should go up a size in order to counteract the fact that my gauge is tighter. And therefore, I chose size 4. But when I blocked the jumper, I have found out that it was 18 stitches, which is exactly what it was supposed to be all along. So I could have actually done size 3. So for the jumper, I actually knitted a size 4 body and size 1 sleeves for 2 reasons. The first one is that my husband wanted really tight sleeves. He didn't want floppy sleeves, and the first jumper I tried to make him was very, very baggy. So he was probably a bit traumatized from that experience. So I made the size 4 sleeves originally, and when he tried it on, they were massive. So then when I looked at the stitch count and I cross-compared it to some of the jumpers that I own that are in a Aran worsted weight yarn, the stitch count in my memory, the stitch count was very similar for their size 4, but this pattern size 1. So that's why I went with size 1. And now that I know that my gauge was actually correct, I could have probably done the size 3 all over, or size 3 body, size 2 sleeves, but I did not. But it is his own fault for choosing and instructing I want very tight sleeves, so I gave him very tight sleeves. Oh, I should have put lip balm on. My lips are so dry. So it does fit, it's just tight. And I didn't do all the decreases that went down the arm. I stopped relatively early on because they were getting very small. And so it does, I don't know how he'll feel. We'll find out. The only other issue he has is the neck. The pattern has short rows, and I did do short rows, but I think I could have done some more just to be able to really make a difference between the back and the front of the jumper. Because even when I was knitting it, it wasn't like super obvious which was the front and which was the back. So hopefully with wear or with wash or with a t-shirt underneath, he won't feel it as much. But I am slightly nervous that he won't want to wear it because it's scratching at his neck. Because it is a Swedish wool, it's quite scratchy. So fingers crossed he'll wear it. He has to. It's been months on my needles. I started in January, I spent about a month on it, and then I think I took the next 5 months off and have since bonded again. When I picked up the jumper for, what was it, the 100th time, when I picked up the jumper in June to carry on working on it, that's when I had kind of forgotten how to do the cables. I haven't done cables in so long. I've only done cables on a hat and on this, so I kind of forgot what I was doing. So there's a couple of sections where I was trying still to figure out where I put my yarn. Do I carry it across the front or behind the cable needle? And so that looked a bit odd. So also another reason I'm not 100% sure if it's correct. I don't know. Can I hold it up? If any of you have made it, does that look like yours? So what else? The yarn is, I haven't even talked about the pattern or the designer. Okay. The pattern is Yggdrasil by Anna Sjösvärd. She is a Swedish designer. She has a YouTube and a lovely Instagram account. And the yarn is the one recommended. It is a Swedish yarn and it is by Järbo, and it is the colour Lingonberry Jam, which is the most delicious sounding yarn I have ever heard of. And I really like this colour. I think it's actually coming up the correct colour for a change. Usually it like blows out and is super red, but I think that looks it in my camera at least. Yeah, I have spent so long making it and thinking about it and knitting on it that now it's time to talk about it, and I feel like I bought a pattern, I bought some wool, and I made a jumper, and here it is. Like, I don't have anything else to say. I did knit it on the recommended needles, 4mm needles, and 3.5 for the neck. And obviously I made it a lot longer than in the pattern. Anna has a very cropped jumper. This is much longer for said man. And I used 501 grams of wool. It's quite baggy on his body, but he's quite broad on the top, and then he gets really thin, like really small. So it does kind of hang. He wanted some kind of shaping, but I don't know. Do you do shaping in a man's jumper? I feel like that's a female. I don't want to like insult anybody by talking about gendered clothing. I know clothing doesn't have a gender, but just traditionally you have shaping in female jumpers a lot of the time. With the like vintage jumpers have it, but I don't know if male jumpers do, or if that's like a traditionally female thing. I don't know. He would quite like it to be more shaped, so I may have to do that for his next jumper, which who knows when that will be. I really want to make him a Christmas jumper, but this was supposed to be his Christmas present and he got it in July, so who knows. What else can I say? So let's wrap that up. Here is the jumper. I finished it on one of the hottest days of the year, like 36-degree heat, and then gave him a jumper and told him to put it on so that I could video it and show you. So I will insert a video so you can see how it looks on him, and I also put it on myself for fun. So if he doesn't ever wear it, I can wear it because it's lovely and cozy. He didn't want his face on the video, so I'm going to blur his face out for you. Hello! I finished my husband's jumper. It's finished! He's been very brave. He kind of likes it, but he doesn't like the neck because it's touching his neck. But he knows how long this has taken me, so he's being polite. He also told me to make it really tight on the arms because he didn't want it to be loose, but now he thinks it's too tight. But now he can't say anything because he told me to do that. This is it on me, and I'm obviously much smaller. So if he never wears it, I can wear it. Please don't fall, camera. Balancing acts. Whoa, crazy lighting. Ta-da! So, my second jumper of redemption is, drumroll, the Chevron Jumper. Please don't turn off your screens. Don't turn off YouTube. I know I've talked about this Chevron jumper for what feels like forever. I personally love this pattern and I could genuinely just knit it again and maybe again. But for the sake of your sanity, I will give a pause. But first out, hear me out. I made the original Chevron jumper that appeared on this channel. I had a blue one and I made the first front part of it, and then my mum came over and went, that is far too small, and I thought, oh, you are right, that must be far too small, and abandoned it. And then I cast on another one using a completely different yarn. It's sport weight yarn and it's a Lithuanian brand, but it is New Zealand wool. I will link them below. What are they? Yarn Home, I believe. And chose the colour palette, didn't swatch, just went for it. And then, shockingly, it was absolutely ginormous. And I don't know what really happened. Sometimes I watch my videos back and think, what? That's super obvious. Why did you do that? Like, why? But at the time, I don't know. My brain just turned off. It happens a lot. You may have noticed. And so, I didn't swatch. I just followed the pattern as is, assuming that the original blue chevron was too small. The blue one I took out a couple of rows. I think I took out 4 pattern repeats instead of 2, and that's why it looked rather small. But this one I just went as is with the pattern. And when I started on, this is the worst part actually. I started with the sleeves just to make sure that it would fit, like essentially like a gauge swatch. And the sleeves were the size of my body. Like you could put the ribbing and the whole sleeve from armpit to armpit. This did not ring any alarm bells for me. I looked at it, I laid it against the blue chevron body and went, huh, it's so much bigger. And then did nothing with that information. And I continued and I made the body. Now I looked at the body and I thought that looks rather large. And then I knitted the back of the body and I put it all together, and then I was somehow shocked that it was ginormous. The sleeves were falling off, the body was massive, and I was very disheartened. And then I decided I love the pattern too much, I'll turn it into a vest. So I ripped off the sleeves, added some armbands, made the vest. Insert photo here. I have still not made up my mind if I think it looks really nice or if I hate it. When I'm wearing it, it's really warm. It's really nice to have my arms out but feel warm. I like looking down at it and thinking, oh, I love that pattern so much. I love chevron. And then I look in the mirror and think, oh my gosh, that is horrible. But I don't have any blouses or anything to wear under it in order for it to look nice. So I'm thinking I need to make a blouse, like a white blouse, vintagey blouse, and then maybe I'll like it. And so for now, that is just something to worry about in the winter. But I did add some footage, maybe I'll add it again. I decided to frog the sleeves and start again. But when I picked up the sleeves and I held them against my body, I thought, I kind of like this. I kind of like that as a jumper. Maybe I could just make it into a jumper. I had 2 sleeves, which is like the front and the back. And that's what I did. I decided, I ripped out the top part, which was the box sleeve. I ripped that out, that was in white. And I ripped out the white panel. I'll try and insert a picture. So basically the body of the chevron is, say, that height, and then you change colour at that height. But the sleeves are squatter, they're a lot smaller, and I wasn't sure if it would look weird. But then I thought, if you don't have the other jumper to compare it to, you wouldn't know that it's supposed to be like taller. So who cares? But I didn't like the white. I felt like the white was just too strong in the other jumper. Also, it looked really bad against my skin tone. So, scrapped the white, ripped that out, but I kept the rest of the sleeve, but just used the sleeve and turned it into the body of the jumper. And I'm gonna get some tea. And I should get some lip balm really. Now, day before, I was trying to write some notes in Ravelry to explain to myself what I did in order to adjust the stitch counts and everything. And I was thinking, God, this would be really hard to explain to someone. And then I recorded the video and thought, I have to explain this to someone. And I had to edit out so many ums and ha's and hms and from my last video that it drove me to insanity. So let's see if I can be slightly more precise this time around. It's going to be quite vague and it's confusing if you're not actually the one doing it, but hopefully I give you some kind of a gist of how I did it. So I obviously had the body, which was cast on as the sleeve. So the sleeve started at 80 stitches and then I had to increase a certain amount in order to get the 16 stitch pattern that went around. So I used the maths that I learned from Squidney's Vintage School of Knitting. She has a Patreon account and she has some, well, they are patterns. I was going to say patterns, but they're recipes in order for you to get that kind of pattern. So you use your body measurements and then she gives you a pattern with a gauge and you match your measurements based off of her calculations. And then in the end you get a jumper that fits you perfectly. I have used her pattern, her pattern knowledge, her pattern calculations to help with my, I think both, with my blue chevron and the rainbow jumper. I used her sleeve. She has like a poofy sleeve. She explains how to do a poofy sleeve and how many to bind off the neck and etc. So I used her patterns for that. So this time I just transposed that information onto this one, but I used a different pattern of hers, and the chevron pattern has a button placket that goes up the back as the back panel. But I was getting really frustrated that whenever I wanted to take on or off this jumper, I would have to contort my body to try and undo these teeny buttons and find a tiny hole within the jumper. So I decided I would put the buttons on the shoulder. So that is what I did. So I used the Maureen pattern. Maureen actually has on both sides, but I just used the instructions to follow for this side. And I also used the calculations for the neckline. I'm slightly dubious if I possibly made my neckline too wide, but it could also be the fact that if you compare it to my other two vintage jumpers, they're quite tight. So maybe it's just a difference I'm not used to. I will see when it comes to the winter what it looks like if you can see my clothes underneath. Typically in 1940s they are quite high, so I think I did make it slightly too wide, but hey ho. I haven't even shown it to you. Are you ready? Are you ready to see it? It's glorious, FYI. Ta-da! I will insert some footage, of course, so you can see. Time to choose some buttons. And I will explain what I did. So there are some differences to the original pattern. Obviously when you make a vintage pattern, the welt at the bottom is about 3 to 4 inches, whereas on the sleeves it's only about 1 or 2. So this is significantly smaller than a normal vintage pattern, which only occurred to me when I put it on and realised this could be about 1 inch longer. Oh, that's because I don't have that extra inch, and when I'm doing the measurements I was doing it from here to the armpit, when assuming that I had the original welt length, and I obviously didn't. So an extra inch would be nice, but hey ho. So of course that is shorter. Then these are squatter, so I just repeated it. Instead of having green, light green, beige, white, I just did obviously what you can see and took out the white. The original pattern has a moss stitch, what do you even call that? Neck? Chest? This would be in moss stitch in the original, which I did do on the blue chevron, which if you have been here a while, you will know I did pick up and I did finish. So another redemption. But it is quite tight, but not unbearably tight. But that one I did do the moss, and I just thought for this one I'd change it up a bit and just do plain stockinette. And I did a moss stitch neck, not for any apparent reason, I just did that. And yeah, here's the buttons. And I think I said to you on my last episode about knitting that I was going to do the poofy sleeves from Squidney's pattern, the other pattern that I had done before. But the original pattern it's like a box sleeve, but it isn't actually a box sleeve, like a classic boxed. If you look up a box sleeve, the instructions that you would get for that were vastly different from the instructions that I had on this pattern, but I couldn't use the number count on this pattern because I took out 2 repeats for the arms, so the stitch count was completely off, and I wasn't sure how to make the box sleeve, so I almost didn't do it. But then I thought, that's basically one of the reasons I like this jumper. Why would I just give up? So I used my noggin and figured it out, and it did take some calculating. I don't know that I did it like the correct way, but in my opinion it worked out nicely. Can you see it? Get my face out of the way. So in a boxed sleeve it kind of looks like this, but this one kind of shaped in slowly and then went like that. So I had to do some calculations that would involve it being the same as it was supposed to be in the pattern. So obviously my gauge is wrong, so I was measuring this is where it gets confusing. The gauge doesn't exist on the pattern. It tells you how many stitches you need in the chevron pattern, and you need 16 stitches in 1 inch 7/8. I obviously didn't get that. Honestly can't remember what I had, but I had to adjust that, and in the end I had, in the original pattern, the body has 9 of these, and my one has 6. So that's how much bigger the other one came out. And the sleeves have 6 of the chevrons and I have 4. I would have preferred more space, but I couldn't do a half chevron, so it's fine. It's just slightly smaller than I would want. Obviously, as you can see, I did the chevron, but all in one colour. I did think about doing it in this, and I did ask you guys, and all of you said go with green, so I listened. Thank you very much. So when I looked up how to adjust your pattern for your gauge, you kind of needed the original pattern's gauge in order to understand how many rows they had, how many inches a certain amount of rows were, so that you could match your row gauge to their amount of stitches. Is this making sense? For example, if the original pattern had 10 rows, and that was, I don't know, 10 rows was 1 inch, that would mean I need the fabric to be 1 inch, but my gauge gave me 8 rows for 1 inch. So instead of 10 rows in the pattern, I would do 8 rows, because that would give me the same measurement, but to my gauge. And also the stitch count. If 5 inches was their gauge, to get 5 stitches, I would need to know how many stitches I had in my 1 inch in order to choose the amount of stitches I needed for 5 inches. And the problem was that the pattern didn't have any other measurement except the chevron. So I had to go online, look up the original yarn that was the vintage yarn that doesn't exist anymore, and find out what the gauge would be if it was stockinette and on the same size needles, and figure out that gauge. So I did see a stockinette section on a different pattern entirely on the internet, and I chose that gauge to guesstimate what their gauge would have been if they had been knitting stockinette, and use that to base my maths and calculations off from. So I think it worked. Again, I'm not sure that if I made the neck a bit too wide, but hey ho. You will see in the footage that I add in. I'm not sure if there's anything else to say. I'm really happy with how it came out. It actually fits. Yes, that's a thing, it can happen. I've definitely learned some things doing this, which was amazing. I've learned also not to just give up and be like, 5.5 inches, I'll do 5, because I think the neck could have been a little bit higher and I was just too lazy, not wanting to do more stockinette. So that I have learned, don't be lazy. And also to probably make it smaller, the neckline smaller next time. But I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. And I'm really happy that I chose the green, because on my other one, the original one I made, it was white and I just hated how it looked. So I'm much, much happier with the green next to my face. So there we go. For now, that is all Chevron Jumper jumpered. I finished the blue one, I finished the original, turned it into a vest, and now I have the sleeves and turned them into a beautiful jumper that I'm very happy with. Which brings us on to my next question. My first question. I need your help. I have decision paralysis and I would like your input. Now that I've finished this vintage jumper, naturally, I feel the urge to cast on another. I have 3 options and I can't make up my mind. One is not a vintage pattern, one is a mock vintage, and one is actual vintage. I'm going to Sweden, did I mention a bazillion times? I'm going to Sweden in September. I wanted to knit a jumper for myself to wear on that holiday, and I can't make up my mind which one. I'm not sure that I'll actually be able to finish it in time, considering I have a different project, well, 2 projects that I'm working on, which I will talk about in a second. But hey ho, I can't not have a jumper on my needles. I think it's physically impossible. So, input. Number 1, I have the sun's gone. Number 1 is the same jumper that I just finished for my husband, the Yggdrasil by Anna, but I originally purchased that pattern and this yarn to make the jumper for myself, and then when all the drama went down with his one, I chose that pattern because I wanted to knit that pattern, but I wanted to make it for myself as well, so I still do, but I wanted to add mohair to mine. So this is the Järbo Svensk ull in What are you? Don't know which colour. This colour. And the Knitting for Olive. This one's in burnt orange. So that must be a rust or something. I would make mine cropped and it would be smaller, and I still have the fresh memory of how to do the cable if I did it correctly. So that one could be the fastest to make, but I don't want to look too matchy-matchy. But I think we won't if mine's cropped, a different colour and a different material. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is this beautiful coloured yarn. Oh. Is that not stunning? This is the campus yarn that I purchased in Stockholm, and I purchased this with the Fabel Knitwear Forest Berry jacket in mind. Yesterday, when I was recording this for the second time, I spoke a load of phooey about the pattern. I said it was this and it was that, and it wasn't any of these. It is knitted in the round, not knitted flat. And the gauge is not what I said it was, and the sleeves are not done how I said they were, so it's a good thing I'm re-recording. This is for the Forest Berry jacket. That is a design by Helena, and it's knitted in the round. It's a like a mock vintage. It's a modern pattern, but in the silhouette of 1930s, 1940s jacket cardigan, and has a really nice berry cable pattern down the front. I only have a couple of concerns. The gauge that Helena has is often quite loose, and I wouldn't want it too loose. I will have to do a swatch to see what my gauge is, because if you look at the recommended yarns, they don't have the same gauge as she does in the pattern using the same needles. So I'm not sure if she's a looser knitter or a tighter knitter, but I will have to do a swatch and actually wash it this time so I get the correct gauge and see what size it comes out. Then that will help me make my decision of which size. She also has a different sleeve technique, and that's one of the reasons I purchased the pattern, because I was intrigued by how she did the vintage style sleeves but without actually seaming them on. It's like you knit sleeves separately and then you join them to the body and then knit up. And that sounds very interesting, and I'd like to try that out. And that might help me out if it looks nice, because sometimes I do get a bit of a bother with my poofy sleeves and the seaming. I think my seaming's getting better, but it's nice to have a few more different tricks up one sleeve. So that is the second option in this lovely colour. The third option is kind of a mystery knit and a combination knit and a secret knit. I want to make a vintage jumper, and I'll use Squidney's pattern, probably her home front jumper, as the base for all the mathematics. I do have vintage jumper, and it has a Fair Isle. They call it Fair Isle. I'm not sure if it's Fair Isle or Intarsia, but there's a picture. I'm keeping the picture part a surprise because, I don't know, I kind of want to. I might do a whole separate video as this as a project. I don't know, I'm kind of excited to keep a little surprise. And I don't know which technique it is, but either way, I've not done one before. I haven't done flat Fair Isle or Intarsia. So it could be a disaster or it could be success, I'm not sure. But it would take probably a long time to get to that. And by the time I'm at that section, I might already be in Sweden, and then it wouldn't be finished, and I wouldn't be ready, I wouldn't be able to concentrate when I'm on holiday. So I'm not sure if that one would work out in time. Basically the whole body would be all one colour stockinette on light fingering weight yarn. Maybe that should be a project for when I'm there. Maybe that's an idea. I still need to work on my gauge for purling colour work, because I did technically sort of do Fair Isle for a very small part of my gingerbread man sock if you watched, I think it was my last knitting episode. But when I changed colours, it kind of squeezed in and made holes and puckered and did strange things. And I don't get that when I do regular in the round Fair Isle, but it for some reason happened when I tried it in this like 1-inch sock. So I don't know, I'm a little bit nervous as to how the whole yoke part of my jumper would come out knitted flat in Fair Isle. I don't know, we'll have to see. So that is option number 3. So please help, which one would you choose? Let me know in the comments. And now for my WIP, my work in progress, the final thing I will talk about. I decided for our trip to Sweden, to Stockholm, not Stockholm, to Gotland, I would make us some matching slippers. I know, matchy. Technically there'll be different colours. His would, depending if they fit, his would be more in the red colour of his jumper, and mine are in this blue. Well, technically blue and white. They are the Arctic Starflower slippers, and they look like this. This is the heel and the back. So I think it looks like this. So it's the foot and the heel, and I'm working on the foot going down. It's in, what are you? Novita 7 Brothers. This is the one with the polyamide, and the one that I have for him has tencel. So it's 75% wool and 25% polyamide and tencel in his case. We will see which one lasts the longest. And it looks really sweet. I don't know how people say, oh, it just takes a couple of days and you'll whip up a pair of slippers. This is 3 days of me working on it. Obviously not full days, not like 8 hours a day. Maybe an hour, hour and a half each day. But I don't really keep count of the time. But I am slightly concerned about second sock syndrome, because I get that and I have 4 of the same pattern to make. And so I'm thinking, when I have finished this one, I will see if it fits me. If it fits me, I can then make him the larger size, and I will finish this singular one, make his one in the red, then go back to finishing mine, and then finish his. Maybe like the change of colour will make it more exciting and I won't have second sock syndrome or fourth sock syndrome, because I really want to finish these in time for September, but I do tend to get bored and then put them down. Finishing socks and mittens is like the nemesis of my knitting. I just get distracted and want something else. I don't do that with sleeves. When I've finished one sleeve, I'll knit the next sleeve. Like, I want the jumper, so I have 2 sleeves. But for some reason, they just take so much more willpower to do the second one. So we'll work on this one. I have another 30 rows until I finished the foot pattern, and then I've got the little toe bit. Then it'll be done. So maybe in a couple of days I will have 1 slipper. That would mean it would take me like 5, 6, 7 potentially days for one. So that would mean about a month to finish them both if I did it every day. Cutting it close there. So I'm going to wrap that up there. I think that's everything I have to say about my knitting. If you are interested in my sewing, then I have a few videos that I just posted recently. They're mostly vintage, again, vintage based patterns. I know that sewing isn't hugely popular on here, don't really know why, because I love sewing, but you guys seem to love the knitting a lot more. But I'm going to keep doing the sewing because I really enjoy making that kind of video and editing that kind of video. So hopefully you just haven't seen them, and then when you do, you'll enjoy them. But alas, I shall still be doing knitting content, don't you worry. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing, I am on Instagram. I post more stories than actual posts, but I do. And yes, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Ravelry, and I'm on Coffee, if you wish to find me. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!